if you expect that paying for someone to PR is going to make your band big, that is not it. PR goes along with the other work.
What's up, everybody? It is Keefy. I'm back with another GhostCultMag.com interview, and I'm so stoked to talk to one of my favorite people in the whole music business. And you're not supposed to have favorites, but I do. Scotty from Tankcrimes Records. How are you doing, brother?
Hey, what's up, Keefy? That was very nice of you to say to start off the interview with some nice flattery. It'll get us going perfectly.
The
Really stoked to be talking to you again. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time, and we like I said, we've circled each other for many years. We chatted a few times on some other pods. I love Tankcrimes. I will do anything to support this label. I have spent my own hard-earned money to buy stuff from the label. You have been nice enough to send me a few things from the label. Also, I don't have my hat handy, but I'm often seen rocking my blue Tankcrimes hat. And
Hey, Keefy, as far as I'm concerned, an Oakland Metro, Oakland Underworld hat that you do have on, that's Tankcrimes. That's
yes,
family. That
yes,
is
family.
a
Yeah.
part. That is a really important. They're a really important part of what I do, and vice versa. So
Yeah.
they're kind of integral to the show side of Tankcrimes. You know.
Word up. When I moved to the Bay Area, the two things I needed to do that I had never done, go to Gilman, which I did, and go
Mhm.
to see an Underworld show, which obviously they're not really doing maybe someday they'll reopen the inside shows, but they've been doing those parking lot shows, which have been so huge for me. Violence, Autopsy, we just talked about how much I love Possessed, and Jeff has been a huge supporter of Ghost Cult even before I lived out here. So I feel so lucky to live in this area with great music and a great music scene.
Yeah, it's great. And like we were saying right before we hit record, it's too bad that I had one foot out the door when you were getting into town and that we've only run into each other one time since you've been in Northern California. So
Eventually it will happen. I do believe you relocated to like your own fortress of solitude outside the city. It's
we are
probably
in parts unknown
yeah,
right
it's fair.
now, in the Sierra Nevada foothills. So I'm about 2.5 hours away from my old house in Oakland.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It's first of all, California is beauteous and large, and there's a lot more inexpensive places to live than Oakland or San Francisco, especially when you need a footprint for your label like you do. Your label, distro, merch, all the things.
Yeah, I mean, I cut my rent in half and I have two different outbuildings on our property separate from the double wide trailer we live in that are just completely dedicated to the label and my interests that are best kept out of the house. For so many years I ran it from my bedroom and then the garage, but I don't think a lot of people understood that the garage was just on the other side of the door from my room. I wasn't even going downstairs to it or outside to it. It was just, it was really, and it just made my room twice the size, and there was a door on the end. So
Amazing. We're all doing a certain version of that ourselves. Like my bedroom, as you see my bed behind me, this is also where I do all my videos and a lot of my content right here at the workstation in front of me. So
yeah,
this is the DIY hustle for people who don't know. And listen, like I said, I could gush about the label and the bands on it, but let's get just a quick 1 minute. What's the origin story of Scotty getting into the music business, starting a label? How did that happen? What was the
okay, this
scene?
is how you're gonna have to reel me in because there's no way I can do the quick intro here, and I don't want to spend too much time on my backstory. So I'll try to do it really quick. Once I discovered the real underground hardcore punk scene where bands were just playing on the floor, didn't necessarily know how to play their instruments that well, doing it for fun, bring your own beer shows for minors, shit like that. Was once I discovered that in San Francisco, which really was a couple years after I'd moved. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and I had lived in San Francisco for a couple years doing awesome shit and going and seeing tons of shows and stuff, but I was definitely more on a concert vibe. So now I've discovered I'm in the back of the record store, I'm in the warehouse in Oakland. It's that vibe. And once I found that became my home, and that's where Tankcrimes comes from. And right away, I with very low skill, I began playing in hardcore punk bands because the level of entry is perfect for anyone, and started playing. And Tankcrimes started. It is very interesting. I had a hardcore band called Deadfall. We toured the U.S. a couple times and put out a few records on 6 Weeks Records and 625 Thrash. So we kind of achieved all our goals. That was the pinnacle of what was awesome for us, were those record labels. And but our very first release, a guy named Bob Scammon, who I'm still in touch with, made us an offer for our debut 7-inch. And that was at Burnt Ramen, which is a warehouse in the East Bay in Richmond, California, where a lot of this stuff happened. And we accepted his offer right away. We were very green. We knew nothing. He was just starting the label. It was going to be his first release, but we knew he was a guy. He was always out at our shows. He definitely liked the band. And more importantly, I guess at the time, he had the $2,000 it cost at the time to put out a 7-inch. And we recorded right there in Burnt Ramen like a couple weeks later. And this is how Tankcrimes starts. The 7-inch comes out, and Bob brings them to our house, which was Tankcrimes San Francisco, before we moved to Oakland. And he dropped off, there was 1,100 records for a first press, which sounds kind of crazy now for like an unknown local band to press up over 1,000 records for, but at the time it was pretty. If you played 25 shows a year and got a good review in Maximum Rock and Roll, you could do 1,000 7-inches, no problem. So he drops off 1,100 7-inches at the house and says, there they are. Have them, guys. I put out your record. And we were like, okay, but like, I don't know, like, isn't the record label like, get it in stores and get us reviews and stuff like that? And he was like, I don't know. I've never done a record label before. And he also was like, the reason he had the money was he had some sort of seasonal job that was like a labor gig that paid well. And so he was like, oh, I'm off to crust punk. He was like, I'm off to hop trains all summer. Here's your records. And so I was kind of already the band dad. And so I was just like, hey, all right, let's figure out how to fucking do this. Like, I didn't want to have a record and just sit on it. I wanted to have a record, and I wanted it to be in Maximum Rock and Roll and Heart Attack and Profane Existence and Slug and Lettuce. And, there was still, just those 4 zines right there were still publishing, if not monthly, quarterly at that time. So there was still a lot of that. This is, we were online, but this is pre-social media and pre-YouTube also. So I got actually one of my early mentors, who then I ended up working with, was Jeff Robinson from 6 Weeks Records, from Capitalist Casualties. And I just asked him, like, dude, what do I fucking do? And he was well established at this point, early 2000s. And he gave me a list of people that he thought would maybe trade records with me, and a list of places to send for reviews. And that was it. And I just fucking went for it. And I made so many friends right away from trading records. And usually the locals with the local guy with the 7-inch label, who has a box distro at the back of your local DIY show, that's usually one of the guys like that's also booking the show. Like, I know you know this, but not everybody knows every scene operates on the back of like 4 people. You need 4 people to be motivated, so 200 people can be entertained all the time in a good local scene. It just so turned out, and then that same year I get invited to join Votesec, was the second band I played in. And Athena, my bass player, actually was married to Jeff Robinson at the time and ran 6 Weeks Records with him. So now the guy who like mentored me on what to do, now I'm in a band with his wife, and we go on that tour. And they were so plugged in on the DIY scene that we're like, every city we're going in, we're like staying with, Ken from Sound Pollution, with Al from The Pissed, with Felix Havoc. And they're already tapped into all these people. And that's like in my head where I want to be. And I'm so stoked on the DIY hardcore scene that I'm just like all in. And so now I'm trading records with everyone. I'm booking tons of shows back home. Around that time, I start booking tours for other bands, and I just fucking went all in. And I was really green, and I love that there's really no entry level for DIY punk. You can, if you want to participate, you can. I mean, it's true for a lot of stuff, but I think for DIY punk, there's a lot of more room, at least there was pre-social media, to be super green and not know what the fuck you're doing and still be appreciated for trying. And the shitty people might talk a little shit, but there's more cool people that will see you making an effort and kind of put their hand on your shoulder and whisper in your ear some tips to do it right. Or and a lot of stuff you just learn the hard way, you know. I was actually having a discussion with Mike from Fucked Up the other day where I said, you know, I never considered myself a musician, but I've played drums on 3 continents. I feel very lucky that we tapped into that scene where I could be a guy that could play drums with a lot of passion and a lot of animated and enthusiastic and aggressive, but without really being able to keep time, which should be the very first prerequisite of playing drums, certainly in a band that's touring Europe and touring Japan. But that just wasn't the case. And the discussion I had with Mike is I don't know if Scotty in his early 20s could have there was a lot of sloppy bands that were fun because you were in the moment, you know, like it doesn't matter so much if the drummer is a little off time, if you're in a basement and chucking beer cans around and circle pitting and everyone's, you know, it's more of a party vibe. So it's not being analyzed as much, you know. I didn't even know I was a sloppy drummer until we started getting reviews for the records I played on. And they would be like, no one was ever really a dick about it. Or if they were, I blocked it out. But it was like, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm not like that great of it. Like I have fun playing drums, but I'm not that great, you know. But I think now that you know, I don't want to say people aren't in the moment, but it's certainly not the same. If I was playing a fun basement show but there was, you know, 15 phones pointed at me, and then my playing would have to be analyzed by strangers on the internet who aren't always nice, I think it would have taken a lot of wind out of my sails at a young age if I would have had to deal with online criticism. And you're only the second person I'm saying this out loud to, because I really just had that thought the other day. I just put myself in that position of what if I was being scrutinized by strangers as a sloppy drummer, even just trying to play dive bars in basements, you know? So one of many reasons I'm happy that I was born in the 70s and got to I didn't really experience the internet as we know it today until I was already an adult.
Fair enough. A lot to unpack there, and I appreciate you sharing all
Yeah,
that stuff
sorry. And
with
then I
us.
started Tankcrimes Records. I took over the label. I took over the label.
Took it over. Before I ask another Tankcrimes related question, I do want to say purely by accident, I have my water bottle with my
I
Tank
saw
Crimes.
it when you took a sip and I was yapping away. And I know if I fucking said something, I'd forget what I was talking about. We'd have to go back to step one.
Squirrel. But imagine being a sloppy singer and bass player in metal and punk bands and getting criticism in your face in real time, like 20 years ago, which I did, and 30 years ago.
Well, that's the other thing. I was not part of the metal scene. I
Yeah.
grew into the metal scene as my friends got bored of playing hardcore and wanted to venture out. Like I understood how crossover and like college rock is what it was called when it came out, as you remember, but what's now like alternative rock or indie rock, post-hardcore, being in my own hardcore scene and starting at the rudimentary level of playing you know, a negative approach style song or a minor threat style song, which is some of my favorite music, but really a good entry level. It's why hardcore is great music for teenagers. It's a really good way to learn how to play an instrument, you know? And I watched my friends develop as musicians and move into metal and move into indie rock. And I absolutely was like, oh, this happened historically. And I get it. You know,
Indeed, yeah. My other podcast that's not interviews and news is with Nick Cameron, Glacially Musical. We just did a series on DRI, and as Nick is famous for saying, when punk rock musicians learn how to play their guitars, they become metal, and he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Yeah, he's not wrong. Well, even like now, the current like the capital H hardcore scene that's so popping off right now, most of those bands are either metal bands or indie rock bands, just with hardcore people in it. And that's one of the things that's cool about the hardcore scene is you can like, for a lot of bands, you can move away from the genre sonically and still remain in the genre as a person, you know?
Indeed. Did you ever think in your life you would see bands like Scowl and Military Gun and Turnstile in Taco Bell commercials? Because I didn't have that on my bingo card.
I didn't think that, but when it happened, once again, I went to high school in the 90s. We saw that happen. I got into punk through Green Day and Rancid. So I kind of got there a little late, like, oh, what's a sellout? All right, I'm like finding out, and that was such a big discussion in the 90s, where I think that's backed off a lot now. So I'll say when bands that are, bands who know what Tankcrimes are in corporate commercials and stuff, bands I've seen. At first, it's like your eyebrows go up, but I think historically it absolutely makes sense.
Yeah,
And
all
all
those.
those
Yeah.
bands are much more on the indie rock side sonically of
Yeah.
hardcore too.
And they all did their time and legit, like, they're not. I bristle at the notion of industry plants. I'm sure there are some, not those three. And even though I have
Yeah,
to give some.
I don't really
Yeah.
believe in that term.
Yeah,
Not where we're
yeah,
at.
it's shitty, and I'm gonna give even though Military Gun like had some beef with Dying Fetus online, which was weird, but I will tell you that a lot of what you say is echoed. Beside talk, you mentioned the word sellout, so I'm gonna talk about the book Sellout by Dan Ozzie or Ozzy. I'm not sure how to say his name, but a writer I admire a great deal as a writer. And while I've been ill recently, I was reading the Punk USA book about Lookout Records from the Bay Area about Rancid, Green Day, Up Ivy, and all these important bands, and even the bands we never heard of, and
Yeah.
bands other people outside of the Bay Area never heard of unless you were really an aficionado of the style, which I was. But what was the just before we move it forward, what was the very first ever release on Tankcrimes? The first thing you put out, what was it?
So after that Deadfall record was given to me, yeah, then we did a band called Case of Emergency, which was this was my friend Negative Tom, who ended up being the roadie on the first Vote Sector that I did. And then we came home, and then that was his band, and they were like Japanese style hardcore D beat, just like chaos thrash. That was before metal had reclaimed the word thrash. So at that point, no one was really talking. And if you were talking about thrash, you were talking about like gauze or like Japanese hardcore, or even like Drop Dead was thrash to me in 2000. So they were doing that style, blown out, distorted, and that was the first band that I worked on a record with. And I knew early on that I only wanted to work with friends, especially because the scene was growing so much in the Bay Area at the time, and like the old heads were telling me like, oh, it's back, like this is a resurgence, like it's been dead for a while. And so I'm getting vibes off old heads telling me that like we're bringing in new blood, and they're happy about it. And so worked with them. Tony Molina was in that band, who I still work with and talk to all the time. And sonically, he's the only one on Tankcrimes that's not in a metal or punk band. You can argue his bands are punk. The Ovens is very punk to me, but they sound more like the Beatles than Discharge. But yeah, the friendships run deep in this label. That was my second release, and Tony and I we're doing more Oven stuff. We'll be working together next year too. So
Glad to hear it.
so,
I'm
but
glad to
not
hear it.
a but a lot of my early releases, they made an impact locally, but punk is fleeting. So it's like a lot of my early releases, if you weren't there and you don't have a connection to a band that put out 1,007 inches in the early 2000s, there's not a lot of reason for you to care. And there's not a lot of reason to go back to it if it's not something from like your local lineage or something like that. And that's okay. One of the things I wish I could do is, honestly, if anybody cares, the record label was still called Controlled by Plague at this time, because that was what it was named when Bob handed it to me. It took me 3 more releases before I realized that my heart wasn't in a name that wasn't mine. And I changed the name on our 5th release. But if anybody wanted to go back, people who finding out about Tankcrimes now, I've got my next release is 138, and you can go back and you can find all my records on Discogs for regular ass prices. I'd say that some of our early stuff, it's in the digital dollar bit. And honestly, if they were all available from one person, I would buy them all back and find them homes, because I have relationships with my fans, obviously. But I can't because they're all in random Discogs people's things. And some of those early ones, the shipping costs more than they want for the 7-inch, you know?
I feel very
But
lucky that I've been able to find Tankcrimes records. Obviously, locally, it's a no-brainer. But my favorite
yeah,
record store locally is Thrill House Records in the Mission.
yeah,
I
great
love
place.
I love them so much. A co-op, like just what a notion. I wish everybody could be like that. You know, obviously everybody loves Amoeba here, and we used to have Tower Records, which was originally founded in Sac. But you know, I love Thrill House. I will support them until I die.
That's great to hear. I love hearing them get mentioned on this. I remember when they opened up, and it just like I said before, punk is fleeting. You don't think that a record store that lets you bring 40s into it is going to be around for that long. And they just celebrated, like, I mean, they're almost as old as Tankcrimes. They just celebrated, like, it's getting close to 20 years. It's at
Yeah.
least 15,
And
you
they
know?
just brought back the basement shows, so I'm stoked. I got to get down there for some gigs. But yeah,
Yeah,
man,
that's the real deal, man. If you want to know the scene I came from, that honestly I've grown out of in a lot of ways, but that's where my heart is, you know. But the basement of Thrill House would, for somebody who's young right now, that would really give you an idea of the scene that spawned Tankcrimes.
it's definitely some true school feelings, similar to where I grew up in the New York scene. I was never an authentic punk, but I was on the punk periphery with all my punk
Mm-hmm.
friends as the metalhead. I often tell the story about my first real Sunday matinee show was Mucky Pup and Burn at CBGB's on a Sunday.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, I came to meet my friends in the Lower East Side in the Village. I get off the train from the Bronx, and I'm wearing my And Justice for All shirt and my long hair and a Yankee hat. And they were like, dude, first of all, put your hoodie up and do not let anyone see that hair. And do not walk in the club. This is like 87, 88. Do not walk in the club with that Metallica shirt. You were going to get punched. And since I was already getting punched in the face every day by my dad, I don't want to get punched by randos. So I buttoned it up and then
Yeah.
and then a year later, it was like Cro-Mags and Anthrax played together.
Oh yeah, you learn
Oh, we're
really
all
fast,
buddies.
you know. Like I definitely had T-shirts that never came back out of the drawer once I started going to shows where minors get to bring their own beer in. You know, it was just like, oh shit.
For real. You haven't lived until you've been punched with brass knuckles at a punk show anyway.
Oh boy,
I don't
all right.
yeah.
I don't know if I need to live like that, but I've
I don't
definitely gone home with black eyes.
yeah, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore, but I've done it. So like the label, right, has been just growing and growing, and there's some, I imagine, pinnacle huge releases coming for you soon. Just really quick, if a band wants to pitch you, they love Tankcrimes, they love the vibe, they feel like they fit in. How can a band pitch you? You know, you said it's mostly
Well,
through friends.
no, they can't. I don't take any submissions. You know, it's too. You know, I think. Sorry, I lost my that little makeshift fucking stage I made for my phone here for us. It dropped. I'm gonna grab a piece of gaff tape like a true roadie that I am. But no, and that's not. And I also, if I have time to explain that to someone, I think I can do a really thoughtful job of it without just telling people not.
And he's back.
One of the things I love, sorry, I'm going to derail us and I'll let you get back to my submission things. But one of the things I love about touring, and it's something that I love about, I also grow pot. I did professionally before, and now I do as a hobby. And also my last real job was screen printing, not t-shirts, but fine art prints and gig posters. One thing I really like about all of those things is that if there's a problem, you have to address it. You have to. There's no, we'll come back to it tomorrow. We'll get it after the weekend. Whether you're growing pot, screen printing a fine art poster, or on tour, if there's a fucking problem, it's all hands on deck until it's solved, until you're back in business. So
that's amazing. Yeah. So let's talk about touring for a second. You are coming up on the awesome, Tankcrimes is helping promote the Brain Squeeze tour from Municipal Waste. Good friends of yours.
Yes, my best friends. Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. They're so
who
great.
I met in New York City in front of ABC No Rio on like the 5th day of my very first US tour, which was, we did like 20 days with Municipal Waste with VoteSec, because it wasn't even their first album yet, which is on 6 Weeks Records, which was my bass player's record label, but they had done the split with Crucial Unit on 6 Weeks Records. And what's crazy is that Waste 'Em All record that's part of what this tour is about. It's the 21st and Waste 'Em All turns 21. It's drinking age. they've reissued it with, now they're on the biggest label in the world, so they've reissued it with Nuclear Blast, and here we are going back out.
And you've been the TM and tournament and tech and many hats for the waste for many years. So I
I've done
appreciate
it
that.
all. Merch, set. I might be the first. There's probably more, but I'll take good credit. Professional guitar tech for a professional band who doesn't know how to play guitar, and also my guitarist is a lefty and I'm not, and I was his guitar tech for a couple of years.
Right on. I definitely have seen you run out at a show and Whitty's drums, because he plays so fucking hard. His drums came off the whatever the cement block, disintegrated because he's like Hulk mode, and you came out and hugged the drum while he's just beating away at the drum. It was like it was like much respect. I know everybody bugs out about that video recently where the guy's like holding the hi-hat up while the drummer's like did, but
Yeah.
you actually literally held like the
That's just
impossible.
that's part of the gig. I mean, I've done it all. I've
Yeah.
held tumbling PA speakers, and definitely the drums all the time. The number one thing that happens with municipal waste is kids step on guitar pedals just fucking nonstop.
Trying to stage dive, right? They
Yeah,
step
I
on.
mean, I got my guitar players on stage right and stage left. Most people who stage dive don't come up the middle, they come up the side, they'll step on a couple guitar pedals, jump off the stage. Another guy comes up this side, and it's just chaos. And we always joke it's like a good cop, bad cop thing because the band obviously celebrates all that chaos. So Tony will be like, everybody get the fuck up here and party. And it's going nuts. And then I'll start getting looks from the bands like, hey, help us out over here. Scotty, it's
Right.
getting a little fucking crowded on stage and shit's getting knocked over and unplugged.
Right. You don't want to lose the integrity of the song and the show if you can. But the waste is
There's a
great.
fine art to having chaos on stage and keeping the songs together and keeping all the music playing, especially when you're an aggressive band like that celebrates stage diving and, people acting aggressively to aggressive music.
Indeed. Yeah, they've grown so much over the years. I'm so happy and proud of them. We'll definitely be checking out that tour. Killer lineup. You're going out with them. Did you say offline you might be retiring from the road? Is this your last tour?
Yeah. I'm actually going to be a ghoul monster on this tour. I have no responsibilities outside of that. Sorry to break kayfabe, though we don't really use kayfabe in Ghoul. We just put on hoods when it's time to get on stage. I'm jumping in Berkeley. I'll be on the second half of the tour. So yeah, I have retired from full-time touring, and for a couple reasons. But the interesting one to people listening, because they care about Tankcrimes, is the label's just too busy. I can't leave. Like, even going on these 2 weeks with all the stuff that's going on, I've tried to run the label from the road, and certainly I've spent years on the road with the label, but shit does slip through the cracks and sales do slow down when I am offline or not paying attention to stuff. And this is going to be a really pivotal year for the label. And I need to be like, I haven't even fucking drank beer in like 7 weeks, dude. Not because I'm trying to go sober, because there's so much going on and I don't want anything to slip through the cracks. I just need to be sharp to pull it all off.
I appreciate that. I'm doing a dry winter right now for my health reasons. So
Oh, good for you.
gonna
Yeah.
have no choice. But which
I am a
sucks because
party animal, but I
right.
always support people fucking taking breaks.
Yeah,
That's never bad.
Yeah, I can't party anymore. That's probably what it ultimately means. But and my podcast, like the tagline is beer, metal, and swearing for the other pod also. So one cool thing you mentioned, I love talking about this merch, right? I'm always have a great experience. We've done some unboxing videos. I always have a great experience with Tankcrimes merch. What is the secret to having a great merch game as a label, whether it's the vinyl itself, accessories, shirts, the things?
I think that the number one thing to selling fucking merch is being a good fucking band. That's the top. Where I come in as a label and what I can offer the band and what I do every time is if you're willing to spend the money and make your shit look better than the next guys, because it's a crowded market, and everybody can't buy a record every fucking day. So what makes yours stand out? And I just really pay attention to what's selling. I'm constantly communicating with my friends who own record stores too, talking to fans and stuff like that. And even some things that move records go in and out of vogue, like download cards and stuff. Or even now, obviously, everybody really wants colored vinyl. Like I rarely even make black vinyl anymore. And that's the market has spoke to me. I like black vinyl. I think it looks really classy. But it's what I grew up with, you know? One thing that has changed in colored vinyl is it used to be people wanted the colored vinyl because it was limited. A huge thing has changed there because I think that the eBay market for limited vinyl kind of just got overblown, and obviously there's still $1,000 records out there, but those are old records. A lot of like a hardcore band having a limited to 100 record that's still an active new band, like new releases aren't flipping for hundreds of dollars on eBay the next day like they were before. And that has changed the demand for super limited pressings. The fans really just want something that looks really cool. And if it matches the art of the record, that's a real positive thing. And, you know, with t-shirts, I'm pretty simple with shirts because I like my bands to sell a lot of like my bands that tour. I want them to sell merch, and a lot of my bands, active bands, run their own web stores and merch stores when they're at home too. And so I'll let them do the full color death metal long sleeve with the 4 sides and all that stuff. And I'm kind of simple. Give me the logo, cool skull, black and white, never goes out of style. People always want that shit.
Indeed. As a Ghoul fanatic, I was heartbroken to miss out on that slime green limited variant, and much respect to you. I love the marketing. Before the record was announced, you were like, hey, Ghoul fans, this email is for you. You did a great email campaign, and then it was on social. It was like, we're not going to say what it is yet. Ghoul is putting out a new release. Get this right now if you want it. It's going to disappear. And it was gone like in 10 minutes, in my opinion. Like,
it was
so
really
sad.
fast. It was under an hour. It was fucking awesome.
I was so sad, but I will get that. I buy everything Ghoul puts out. I'm a huge Ghoul fan. So
well, I'll let it, I haven't said this online yet, but we'll slip it into the podcast. The sold out Die Hard edition of the record, those were just the labels copies of the Die Hard. Those will be on sale, the other half of them, at Ghoul's merch booth.
Sick.
We've been keeping that one in our back pocket until the week of the tour, but I've been sold out of them. So
I'm sure they're gonna sell out before they get to the East Coast. So I'll see some of my spies on the before they get.
Yeah,
to the
we'll
West
see.
Coast.
We'll see how they go. The guys are actually starting the tour. They're not driving. Necrot's doing some shows out to the East Coast, but Ghoul is now part of Ghoul's on the East Coast now. So they're just starting out there. And the boys were in the jam space this morning, like making a pallet of vinyl.
Amazing.
To ship to and merch to ship to the East Coast because they haven't toured very much, and they won't tour very much, which is another reason to get out and see them when they play. They have vinyl that I've been sold out of literally for years, that like the band copies they have them. So that's another thing to look forward to. Vinyl collectors, Ghoul will have shit that you can't find at any store unless it's a used copy, and that you have not been able to order from Tankcrimes for a long time. So
sick.
So we'll hype that. I'm hyping that right now.
Yeah, hype it right now. That's what Melvins does. If you go see Melvins on tour, they pull out all the little artifacts and rarities, and they sell them right at the merch table, not marked up. If you get what's in this box, you got it, and that's the last of it. Brilliant.
Well, part of the Tankcrimes record deal that I learned early on from some of the DIY labels that I looked up to, like Havoc and 625, is the band royalties just come in records right off the bat. So now the label's grown a lot, so and digital can be a big thing with some bands, so I have different deals with different bands. The basis of it is, I'll press your record, I'll give you all your royalties on day one before I even sell one record for each record pressing. But now the band has to go out and sell those records, and it's a much better deal for them monetarily if they sell all the records for cash. It's much bigger than any record deal would give them if we were splitting the profits from each sale. But it works well for a growing record label because if they want to make their money from their work, they need to go play shows to sell those records. A lot has changed with online commerce and Bandcamp and stuff, but it's generally still the same thing. If I give you all your royalties on day one and that's 200 LPs, well, you better get out there and play some fucking shows because you're just sitting on some boxes, you know? So it's always been a cool, very punk way for me to say, okay, you guys can earn some money off your art, but you got to work for it more than just going into the studio. You're going to have to get out and play. And then a band out playing shows, that helps me sell records. So win, 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 win.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Last two questions for you, man. You've been wonderful.
Yep.
I said we wouldn't go this long, but here we are.
I knew we would, man. I knew we would. You can't shut me up, dude.
You feel
I'm a 10-minute answer guy every time.
But also, like, there's just certain people I vibe with, and I feel like if I knew you like 20 years ago, we would still be friends. Or if we weren't in music,
absolutely.
We met at a job where we were doing like labor or working at a warehouse or an office or something, we would be bros. I feel like that. You've been really cool. I agree. To me. Let's talk about the importance of PR. And if it helps actually sell records and help these bands, because there's a lot of debate right now about whether PR is worth the money, whether reviews and trying to court them matters anymore. And I wanted to hear from you, a label owner with some very impressive, huge bands on your label in terms of importance to underground music. Do you think PR still matters? You use one of the best PR firms, Shoutout, Earsplit, but is it still worth it? And do you care about reviews or not for your bands and your records released?
I'll start by saying that my next release will be the biggest one that the label's ever done, and I have spent more on PR than I ever have before. So I believe in it. And I've hired a PR team in Europe for the very first time. So I'm actually working with Earsplit in North America and this company called October Promotions out of Germany, I'll be working with in Europe. So yes, I think it's important. Now, I'll wind that back and say, if you expect that paying for someone to PR is going to make your band big, that is not it. PR goes along with the other work. You know, a lot of stuff that we used to use PR for, use a publicist agent to get like a premiere or something like that. Premieres are dead. I mean, for a small band, you know, I forget if it's the 2-click rule or the 3-click rule, but this is like an early .com era fucking rule about using the internet for commerce and growth. If you're a small band and you've got 1,000 Instagram fans, they don't want to click to Metal Injection and then find the page and then hit your Bandcamp thing. These fans are still very casual. You're way better off putting it everywhere. You don't want to put up these barriers for discovery to anyone early on. And while it might seem like having a bigger named blog behind you might feel like it's giving you a boost, if no one knows your name, no one's going to stop scrolling just because it's on the Metal Sucks Twitter or the Decibel Twitter. It's just not going to do that for you, you know? It might look good in your bio, but who's reading your, that we debuted a song at Decibel Magazine? That's fucking huge, you know, on paper. In reality, everyone's just fucking scrolling on their phones where, you know, social media has turned into cable television. It's really bad with ads and they did something really smart. They got us all addicted to it before they ruined it. So now we just keep going. It's just enough to keep our attention and feed our addiction to it. But it doesn't mean I don't think people explore the internet the same way they did previously. Now we just all spend we all spend all our time in the same 5 places, you know? So you got to be careful with PR and what size your band is. If you're going on tour, PR can be important because even though there's less and less publications, certainly in the United States, I mean, Decibel is our absolute champion, but nobody else is doing anything monthly, not in the US, you know, like actually like moving into doing PR in Europe, like Germany has like 4 monthlies or quarterlies still doing the music we like, just in fucking Benelux, just Germany, Switzerland, Austria. And it's like, wow, we have one. So
it's true,
but
it's true. Shout out to Albert.
Yeah, for sure. And but that PR person can help you get in touch with staff at those magazines and stuff like that. And another thing, though, I think it's one thing PR can do right now is because there's so few publications, there's a lot more smaller indie publications. You've been doing Ghoul's Cut Strong for a long time now. Hats off to you. And I know you've seen even more people start up in more recent years because there's not really a pipeline to success in music journalism right now. And it gets smaller. Capitalism's a motherfucker. It's eating itself. It gets smaller and smaller all the time. And one thing that PR can do for you now is that anybody starting a new blog or a podcast or somebody who's got a little juice, they are tapped in with the PR people in the US and they will get you. You can have lots of discussions and so what I'm getting as I've talked to bands and sometimes it can feel like, why did I talk to this person for an hour? Like it's really short-sighted, but to say like, well, we have more Instagram followers than their whole publication or whatever. So what's it doing for us? Well, that's really short-sighted because it's always good to have somebody else besides yourself talking about your project because no one's ever going to care as much as you do. But if you can get other people to help you talk about it, that's a huge thing. So two things I always tell bands about smaller interviews and why they're really important. And I'm talking about, really, I'm doing a YouTube tomorrow that there's like less than 100 subscribers. And I'm excited about it. A lot of interviews, especially for a band, you're going to get asked the same 10 questions your whole fucking career. That's just how it works. Even thoughtful journalists who do their homework might come up with those 10 questions that drive you crazy because they get brought up every time. So doing other interviews, it gets your chops up. You get comfortable with your answers. You get to know the way you like to say it and stuff, and it can become really natural. And B, never underestimate someone. If fucking Steve's metal blog has the intuition to have gotten on the promo list for a PR company or reached out to you directly through social media, what's to say that's not the fucking next editor of Revolver? Revolver's had 10 fucking changes of ownership and editorial staff since I've been paying attention to it. That shit happens all the time. So I never underestimate fucking anyone and would love it if the guy at fucking Steve's metal blog ends up the fucking editor at Revolver in a couple years. And that's it. I'll start repeating myself, but you should nod in your head. You know what I'm talking about, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great stuff.
And because you've grown Ghoul's Cult, it's the consistency and stuff. And if you can see that in someone, if you can see that ambition in someone, that they're making that effort and they're going to try to be consistent, don't underestimate them, man. They'll do it, There's probably people that didn't think I'd still be doing this shit fucking 21 years later, fucking booking a fucking label showcase tour and all this shit. Like I didn't. I certainly didn't. Shit comes at you as you go.
You got to have doubters and haters, otherwise you don't really know your worth. But I will say for a last little glow up and a final question.
Okay.
New Ghoul album and tour. Morbicon just booked a huge tour. We know the Necrot album is coming. I'm sure that's the big record you're alluding to.
Oh yeah, I can say that. People know it's coming, but I'm still like we're so close. I'm backing off saying too much.
Of course. Circling the wagons. You mentioned Ovens. Who is the most underrated band on Tankcrimes that has a future release coming that we should be paying attention to?
Well, I think the most underrated band on Tankcrimes is Deathgrave. And I think it's because they're not an easy listen. They're a challenging band. And they're kind of a band's band. And a lot of times bands that have that description that they're challenging or difficult, but really excellent musicians, a lot of bands like that become bands. You see them on a lot of sometimes fans don't even understand why they get so many good shows because they don't get it. And it's like, because they were asked to play the show because the musicians get it. But sometimes it doesn't communicate to a wider audience. And I'm talking about a wider audience of grindcore. It's not even that big of an audience, but they're a challenging band. So they're like a real slow grower. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm disappointed. I'm saying that because it's the truth. That band is, underrated for sure.
I could not agree more. And I'm pretty sure that Deathgrave was my last purchase from Tankcrimes.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
Coincidentally, that last record.
We went all out. It was their second album. So even though even though they're they're not doing Necrot or Ghoul numbers, but we still let them put the foil stamp on there. We did super fancy vinyl and stuff like that. I once a band's on their second record, even if they're a less popular, I keep a really tight roster, right? So if you made it to your second album and you'll play 25 shows a year, you can still get the full Tankcrimes treatment. I'll try to provide as much as I can to each band.
Word. I will just say, lastly, as a vinyl collector and fan and nerd, please normalize that Mylar. I'll pay more for it if I can get the Mylar sleeve already with the record in it. It's for life. These things are important to me. I don't just collect them to have them. I play my music. I love my music, and let's get the best packaging and the best thing possible for the life of the record and your record players. But that's just me.
Yeah, we do. I do now. Because I shrink wrap records because we still retail a lot of records. I have a really good distribution. I work with a lot of records, and that it just makes it a lot easier. But I do for the mail order ones, I put in the Mylar and have the record outside of the sleeve, just kind of like all the stuff that's for collectors. Because I feel like people that order direct from the label, especially pre-order people, those are my collectors. So yeah, I tried it. Like I said, man, if I can throw a foil stamp on something, if I can if I can put a poster in it. Now I'm doing for the big releases, we're doing oversized posters, which have been a huge hit. And that takes me back to my childhood, not just record stores, but skate shops, fucking video stores. I grew up, you'll remember this. God, I love talking to people my age. You will fucking remember this, Keefy. Do you remember being able to go to the video store and writing your phone number on the back of the poster, and the fucking video store would call you when they were done with the promotion and you could go pick up the fucking poster? I did that at skate shops too, man. And that's why I still have all my shit covered with fucking stickers and posters. That was so important to me then. And it's just something, as everything moves online, that's something that just like labels aren't spending on big posters for stores and stuff like that. And I did the math, and it doesn't work for all bands, but I'm lucky enough to have a few bands that sell thousands and thousands of LPs. So I did the budget on that. And if you can press 2,000 posters, even big ones, it's not that expensive if you can fit it into your overall budget. And we're bringing that back, and it's been a huge success, and I'm really happy with that too.
Killer, man. Scotty, man, what can I say? Thank you so much for everything. Thanks for everything you do for all these bands, for the scene, for music. And again, next time I get lucky enough to get in your vicinity, we'll yuck it up for more than a few minutes in passing. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
you. Thanks for everything.
Peace, Keefy. Thanks, man.
Peace, bro.